I hope you all enjoyed Sunday and Monday, wasn't it? The series From Russia with Love, and I think it's kind of shocked many and left a few people questioning a whole heap more of the narrative that's been rammed down our throats, that we've all now found out that so much of it is complete bullshittery, and it's not funny. There is an argument we need to concentrate on the future, but if you don't recognise what the problems are in the now, and you can only learn that from the past, then we're bound to repeat the same mistakes. Russia has been denigrated certainly for the last 100 years, when they had so much more to offer we the people, and I'm glad I was able to redress some of that, and we can look at Russia in a different light. I mentioned if you asked people to name 3 things about Russia, they'd probably say Putin, vodka, and communists. Well, clearly that's not the case, is it? And this is how the elites, the cabal, deep states, agencies have distorted our history, so you can't make any sense of what's going on. They've denigrated whole peoples, whole countries, whole colours, so that you're always divided and conquered. And the key going forward is we merge with all countries, all colours, all creeds. Doesn't matter what sexuality you are, as long as you're not putting it in people's faces. I think people are not bothered. But the biggest problem we face, I covered a couple of shows back, is fear and seducement. And you probably add the third one into that, is label boxes. I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm left, right, centre, up, down, backwards, forwards, you name it. How about I am me? No titles, just you is enough. I've said in previous shows, it's not about how important you are, but what important things you're doing. And if everyone adapted that policy, married with a personal responsibility to be the best they can be, and not be vampiric at the expense of others, then we will turn this world around in record time. So I hope I'll be covering more of those 2 shows in the second hour. We have some intel. We may get some more between now and the second hour, and we'll see where we go. But I played role with the changes because changes are unfolding. Sometimes people don't put 2 and 2 together, but maybe some of the things we'll be covering in the show will show you how much people are now starting to change. I think they've had enough, and that will be a glorious day for us all. Right, let's get into the details for the show, and if you want to listen to the show, it's www.spreaker.com/user/8955881. You can also listen live on the articles website, which has got all the archives, including all the bigger shows that we've done, the special ones that are not the normal Thursday ones, although they're all on there as well, at thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. So there's a lot of articles on there about self-empowerment, grounding, shielding, centering, breath work, you name it. It's all on there, complete package of how we improve ourselves. We have The Facebook page, Truth, Honour and Integrity, and the Facebook alternative social media without the privacy data and mind control techniques that Facebook employ. On MeWe.com, and that's Truth, Honour and Integrity. If you are struggling to find it, send an email to this email address, where you can also send comments and any questions for the show at truth.honor.and.integrity@gmail.com. Remember, for those in Europe, honour is spelt the American way without the U, without the For those who listen to the last two shows, you'll know why I said that. And we have the foundation and the link for that at thepeoplesclub.org. That's thepeoplesclub.org. Right, let's get into some of the news. We've got a lot of pieces to cover in the second hour. And yeah, as predicted last week, all the furore over the North Korea, it's cancelled, it's off, and I said to ignore it. Well, now it appears that the US team is holding talks with North Korean officials to prepare a possible meeting between Donald Trump and the North's leader Kim Jong-un, and the talks in the village of Panmunjom in the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas is the latest sign that the summit could take place after all. Now, last Singapore next month, citing the North's hostility. Yeah, right. But both sides have been working to get it back on track, and on Saturday, Mr. Kim and South Korean President Moon Jae-in held an unannounced meeting, and Mr. Moon said the North leader had again made it clear his commitment to complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, which hopefully means removal of the ones in the south also. And he spoke later of his fixed will that the summit should go ahead, and Mr. Trump said things were moving along rather nicely. So as forecast last week, ignore the media BS. We'll have more of the BS no doubt later. Yes, we do. A US Senate committee this week passed a version of a $716 billion defense policy bill, including a measure to prevent Turkey from purchasing Lockheed Martin F-35's Joint Strike Fighter jets. Thought those didn't work. Oh well, perhaps it's another F. No, don't go there, Thomas. The amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, from the Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen and Republican Senator Tom Tillis would remove Turkey from the F-35 program over its detention of a US citizen by the name of Andrew Brunson. Now, Brunson was a Christian pastor who could be jailed for up to 35 years, and he has denied terrorism and spying charges in a Turkish court this month. Not too sure that's correct, but there you go. And he's been in pre-trial detention since 2016, and it also faults NATO ally Turkey for its agreement with Russia in December to buy S-400 surface-to-air missile batteries. It's all about trade. Why don't we just share it all? And Ankara wants the system to boost its defence capabilities amid threats from Kurdish and Islamist militants at home and conflicts across its border in both Syria and Iraq. Now, according to Siphoned's office, the intention to purchase the Russian system is sanctionable under US law. Really? There is tremendous hesitancy about transferring sensitive F-35 planes and technology to a nation who has purchased a Russian air defense system designed to shoot down these very planes. Well. And relations between Ankara and Washington have been strained over a host of issues in recent months, including the US policy in Syria and a number of legal cases against Turkish and US nationals being held in the two countries. And Turkey has said it would retaliate if the United States enacted a law halting weapons sales to the country. I wonder what would happen if we created a law of halting all weapons sales, and we used the budget for food instead. Texas next, Bush country. Maybe we'll have the proverbial biblical bush going on fire one day. Wonder will it talk? Anyway, a month after President Donald Trump called for a sending of National Guard troops to the US-Mexico border, the head of the National Border Patrol Union called the deployment a colossal waste of resources. And he went on and said, we've seen no benefit. And this is Brandon Judd, who represents 15,000 agents and the National Border Patrol Council. And the criticism is a dramatic departure for the group, which endorsed Trump's candidacy for president and has praised his border security efforts, including the National Guard deployments. What you're not getting out of that is it's cut off the Bush Texas Rangers group. That's what they're complaining about. Oops. Finally, the Justice Department in America has now opened a criminal probe into whether traders are manipulating the price of Bitcoin and other digital currencies, dramatically ratcheting up a US scrutiny of red-hot markets that critics say are rife with misconduct. And the investigation is focused on illegal practices that can influence prices. Oh my, just Bitcoin. I wonder if they'll go through the silver market, the gold market, the grain prices, the oil prices. We can only hope. And they said practices such as spoofing or flooding the market with fake orders to trick other traders into buying or selling. Well, of course, we mentioned as part of the intel many months back that the actual number of coins was nowhere near the level that they were putting out and was dropping considerably, and it still is. And the federal prosecutors are working with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, a financial regulator that oversees derivatives tied to Bitcoin. Is that derivatives word? Authorities worry that the virtual currencies are susceptible to fraud for multiple reasons, and skepticism that all exchanges are actively pursuing cheaters. Wild price swings that could easily push valuations around, and lack of regulations like the one that governs stocks and other assets. They haven't been watching too closely, have they? And Bitcoin last week extended its decline, which was down 3%, down to $7,409, which is a massively inflated price, as it was going down to zero. But they're playing games. It's all an illusion to get, basically, for people to give over what, even though it's a fiat currency, a valid currency like dollars, and you get fresh air. or bitcoins. And I know people argue for and against it, but it's all it is designed is to keep cash flow going, which they're all desperately short of. Like the dinars, it's another scam, and it will take a number of years for people to realise before it is a scam. By that time, many people, like the people who invested in dinars, will have lost all the money. And who do you go after? A computer? Nobody knows who owns them or where they come from. So these concerns, anyway, the Bitcoin has been down more than 20% since May the 4th, and such concerns have prompted China to ban cryptocurrency exchanges and nations including Japan and the Philippines to regulate them, and that's contributed to it plummeting. Here's a sign of the people fighting back, which will be a theme in tonight's show. And Europe has took a new tough line online privacy rules, and they've initiated a policy and also issued lawsuits were filed almost immediately against several social media giants, including Facebook, Google, WhatsApp and Instagram, have all been sued for not being in compliance with Europe's general data protection regulations. And the lawsuits seek about 8.8 million combined from Facebook and its subsidiaries WhatsApp and Instagram, and also from Google. I would times that figure by about 100, personally, 8.8 million. And they're now stated that they're looking for the big companies that really willfully violate the law, and that kind of try to ignore it and get away with it. And the Austrian lawyer Max Schrems filed the lawsuits against Facebook in Austria and WhatsApp in Germany, and against Google in France and Instagram in Belgium. I presume that's so they can't broad sweep a rule in one country. People are getting clever. And here's another example. I'll be covering some of this in the second hour. Imagine if everyone walked out of a company and then it increased to other companies and other companies and other companies, and basically their whole system would collapse within Drake time, 2 weeks. Well, this is what the people of Google have done. And thousands of Google employees were speaking out about the company's close relationship with the Pentagon and their involvement in the business of war. Now, initially, 3,100 Google employees signed a letter to Google CEO Sundar Pichai demanding that the company cancel an ongoing contract with the Pentagon that supported a drone program called Project Maven, M-A-V-E-N, and as expected, Google has not backed down, and at least a dozen of the employees who signed the letter are now resigning from the company in protest. Now, Project Maven, for those who don't know, is an AI system, and that is being deployed to scan images in drone footage and identify targets that they choose. And it was launched in April of 2017, and according to a Pentagon memo, the objective is to augment for automated processing, exploitation and dissemination for unmanned aerial vehicles in order to reduce the human factors burden of full motion video analysis, increase actionable intelligence and enhance military decision making. When the issue was raised last month, the Google spokesperson Diane Green assured the concerned employees that the technology will not operate or fly drones and will not be used to launch weapons. However, the employees saw right through that excuse and pointed it out in a letter. While this eliminates a narrow set of direct applications, the technology is being built for the military, and once it's delivered, it could easily be used to assist in these tasks, and this plan will irreparably damage Google's brand and its ability to compete for talent. So people fighting back in Google. We'll have more on that. It was announced this week. It won't come as a surprise to regular listeners, but thousands of American troops could be permanently stationed in Poland. Why? As a deterrent to Russia. Really. This was according to the country's defence minister last Monday, adding that he's held talks with US officials, and the defence minister, Mr. Blazziak, told his state Radio 1 he's recently held talks in Washington about having a permanent presence of US troops in Poland, where they are currently on a rotational, temporary, open-ended mission. Russia's annexation of the Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine has caused anxiety in the region, as Moscow has continued to support separatists in eastern Ukraine, and the results of our efforts is that the US Senate has contacted the Pentagon about an assessment of the permanent presence of US troops in Poland. Such presence is of great importance because it deters the adversary, according to Washington. Now, the US and NATO troops, that's the key word, NATO, were deployed to Poland and the region last year as a security assurance. Nothing to do with security, everything to do with dick swinging, and it's high time that our soldiers are brought home. All of them. They're not defending America's interests, whether it's in Poland, whether it's Lithuania, Ukraine, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, you name it, Yemen. None of them are about the security of Americans, and it's everything about collecting resources, bullying other countries into submission, and all at the behest at the Rothschilds' army known as NATO. And of course Trump scaled back some of the funding. I would like to see him go all the way and block all funding to NATO. If Europe thinks Russia's a threat, let Europe defend Europe. We've had enough of wasting our money, which the people badly need, allegedly defending, which is a load of bollocks, as we all know, the rest of the world, to keep them safe from nasty Russians or nasty Muslims or nasty Chinese or nasty North Koreans. It's funny, none of those countries I've just mentioned have ever attacked America. Funny that, isn't it? I hope the public and the soldiers' families rise up over that, because Russia's threat is complete and utter nonsense. You see, the Cold War made money, vast amounts of it, including the want of funds Nothing to do with Mr. Wanter, and everything to do with looting out of the USSR as it was at the time. They've been doing it for the last 100 years. Next two stories are about two more resigning, quote unquote. The Republican Thomas Garrett of Virginia, no doubt, announced on Monday that he's struggling with alcoholism and will abandon his run for a second term in Congress so he can focus on recovery in his family. Yeah, right, Mr. Garrett. And he was a member of the Conservative Freedom Caucus and is the 44th Republican to retire or announce they will not seek re-election to the House this year. 44. That must be roughly 1/6 of the Republicans that are in the House. Ballpark may even be 1/5. And people say things aren't changing. Now, according to the report, many are leaving in anticipation of a strong Democratic performance in the congressional races this fall, and out of frustration with partisan politics in Washington. You can make excuses all you like. You failed. The former Virginia state senator was facing a robust challenge from his Democratic challenger, journalist and author Leslie Coburn, who had raised more money than him and had more cash in hand. Big deal. Next one who's going to bite the dust is Missouri Governor Eric Grittens, described sometimes as a rather brash political outsider whose unconventional resume as a Rhodes Scholar and a Navy SEAL officer had made him a rising star in the Republican Party again. Well, he abruptly resigned on Tuesday amid a widening investigation that rose from an affair with his former hairdresser. Perhaps he got a blow and dry. Who knows? Sorry. The 44-year-old governor spent nearly 6 months fighting to stay in office after the affair became public in January in a television news report. And the probes into his conduct by prosecutors and lawmakers began with allegations stemming from the affair and expanded to include questions about whether he had violated campaign finance laws. There's the kicker. Nothing to do with the affair. And Mr. Grittens said his resignation would take effect tomorrow. I expect that this next news story will have a rolling effect and will affect a lot more countries as more and more gets revealed. But this week, European judges have ruled that Lithuania and Romania violated the rights of two Al-Qaeda terrorists suspects by allowing the CIA to torture them on their soil. And the US captured Abu Zabadeh and Abd al-Rahim after the September 2001 attacks in the United States, and they are now at the Guantanamo Bay prison in Cuba. The CIA operated secret prisons. What was her name? Haspel, Thailand, including Lithuania and Romania. And the European Court of Human Rights said both countries have violated European prohibition on torture, and the European Court of Human Rights issued a similar ruling against Poland in 2014. I suspect you're going to hear a lot more. Of course, I can't remember her first name. I think her name's Haspel, the one that's just took over the CIA. She ran a CIA torture camp, rather dangerous one, a nasty one at that. Deleted all the videos. That was in Thailand. They're in pretty much every country. As Mr. Keenan would only know too well in Bulgaria, wouldn't he? Retailers are facing a shipping squeeze. I suggest this is covering other things up, but we'll go through it anyway. And the trucking industry currently just can't keep up, according to them anyway. There's a shortage of roughly 50,000 truck drivers across the United States of America, and it's hitting both businesses and consumers in the wallet. Companies are complaining about how the driver shortage is impacting their businesses. Meanwhile, the cost of convenience shipping is starting to catch up with the consumers. As per usual, Amazon jumped in and recently hiked its Prime membership to $119 a year from $99, 20% increase. And the retail giant said one of the reasons for the price jump was increased shipping costs. But the driver shortage isn't just because of demand created by online shopping. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. According to Bob Costello, chief economist at American Trucking Associations, he says we have a demographics problem. Demand is strong. Trucks haul over 70% of the freight tonnage, and our average age is very high, and we don't have enough female truck drivers. And he's blamed demographics. Well, perhaps we should get the bullet train up and running and stop state departments stealing it. And the shipping prices will go, costs will go down considerably. It'll get from A to B a lot quicker, and then we'll have less trucks on the road and less issues. Now, I suspect, and this is part of an ongoing problem, and we're going to start seeing it. I had a good chat with a friend of mine today about food shortage. We've already heard about truckers shortage. You have to be aware of these stories coming out one after the other and start putting two and two together. And they always use another country to test to see whether people are paying attention or not. But the latest, and this is twofold, is millions of Afghans face hunger after a drought decimated crops, the UN said on Tuesday, and is calling for an extra 115 million to help families buy food. Yeah, right. Yeah. 2/3 of Afghanistan's 34 provinces have been hit by a lack of rain or snowfall since late last year, and the Food and Agricultural Organization said some rivers and water points have totally dried up, and the last wheat harvest has been completely lost. 6 months down the road, millions of people could be in a situation of untenable hunger without knowing where the next meal is going to come from. And the UN humanitarian coordinator in Afghanistan is saying the drought has already forced 21,000 people to leave their homes and settle on the outskirts of the western city of Herat. Well, part of the problem, there's a number of issues with this. Afghanistan has been invaded for the last 20, 30 years. It's funny, is it not? Not funny, haha, but funny, ironic, that all the poppy fields haven't dried up, have they? Maybe they've got too many poppy fields, and maybe they need more food fields. Of course, the military is struggling for funds. So the UN's demanding 115 million. Do you really think that's going to feed the Afghan people? Me either. And it's another sign of the desperation for funds and desperation to hoodwink the people and what's really going on, in my opinion. What are we next? Let's bash Trump. Barack Obama wasn't particularly interested in Europe, according to the EU, something which was made clear back in 2010 when he didn't even show up for an EU-US summit in Madrid. Instead, at least in the early part of his presidency, Obama focused on Asia. No surprise there, given Rothschilds et al. Were moving everything over to Asia and they're going to dump we're going to dump the EU and America, leaving the old continent to dwell on its diminished importance in Washington. And yet, despite this snub, Obama generally went through the motions and treated its leaders with respect. Indeed, he belatedly realised that the likes of Angela Merkel, spit, and David Cameron, where's the pig, were liberal bedfellows, heaven forbid, useful for his issues-driven presidency. Nevertheless, there's a lingering feeling that the Democrat darling never really got to Europe. Europe didn't really get to us either. By contrast, his successor Trump and his family roots in Germany and Scotland arguably understands this place better than any US president since JFK. And he was married into the Czech and Slovenia public and spent decades crisscrossing the continent, pursuing business deals from County Clare in Ireland to the Russian capital of Moscow. And it's all clear that this experience has taught him not to take any of America's NATO partners seriously. Indeed. But it's been made quite clear Trump doesn't see them as allies. Instead, he views them as a client state who are subject to Washington's orders. That was a report out of the EU this week. I'm hoping Trump's not interested in NATO or its partners. Of course, the US has issued rather heavy tariffs on Europe and Canada today. No doubt that's going to cause much consternation and more drama, but we'll see. China, we'll have more on them later, but it's another example. It's stepping up to its involvement in Syria, not with its military, but with cash, and lots of it. For Beijing, war-torn Syria is a golden opportunity for reconstruction businesses. For Damascus, prosperity means peace, and China's foreign minister Wang Yi and his Syrian counterpart Walid Muallem have shown through their cordial discussions that Beijing and Damascus are on the same page when it comes to envisaging the rebuilding of Syria through partnerships. They build business partnerships, we destroy it, courtesy of the State Department. The Chinese President Xi Jinping also recently backed the Russian-brokered peace deal talks held in Sochi and Astana, when Russian President Vladimir Putin called for an urgent shift to diplomatic efforts to stabilize Syria and the whole of the Middle East region. Beijing appears to have answered that call with ambitious reconstruction plans, and firms from China are reportedly queuing up to win contracts for rebuilding entire towns, villages, roads, bridges, schools, hospitals and communication networks devastated by nearly 7 years of war. That won't please Halliburton, will it? Or Blackwater? Oh my. Of course, Italy is another country in turmoil, and basically this is similar, not too dissimilar to the UK and its Brexit, the exit, the EU, and most of the to and fro is between the pro-EU and the ones who are Eurosceptics, who were the winners of the March election. And it took weeks of negotiations for a populist coalition to take shape, but the president has now controversially vetoed it. So Italy's now back to square one, like most other countries. And now the country faces an interim government not yet in office before having more elections. Now the economy, which is the Eurozone's third largest, has been anemic for years, and the EU and global markets are watching rather nervously. This is like the Greece and Cyprus issue, and Spain and Ireland, Portugal. Now back in 2010, 2011, that debt crisis was patched up, but was never solved. They can't. They don't have the funds to do so. And the president's rejection of the populist choice for finance minister has exposed tensions over the euro. And he advocated a plan B for Italy to exit the euro, the same as Britain did. And anti-establishment populists, the 5-Star movement, hello, 5-Star, and the League were enraged. 5-Star. Where have I heard that term before? For those who don't know, it's similar to the Carlyle Group. The new Prime Minister designate is an international IMF veteran close to Brussels technocrats and solidly pro-Europe and pro-austerity. Go figure. And he is known as in Italy as Mr. Spending Review and Mr. Scissors. I cut all funding to the people whilst giving loads of money to the church and other rogue elements. In other words, and we've had time. Last few bits of the news. This is getting rather comical now, and I hope people see through it. But the media has made, well, they're making out an awful lot of things that are just pure nonsense, and twisting people's words, and seem to have lost a sense of humour or any sort of irony. And according to the media, President Donald Trump lamented his choice for Attorney General yesterday, writing on Twitter he wishes he'd chosen someone else other than Jeff Sessions, who enraged the president when he recused himself from the Russian investigation. And the South Carolina Republican said he believed Trump was expressing frustration that Sessions should have shared his reasons for recusal before accepting the role of Attorney General. Now, in the media, Trump has frequently criticised Sessions over his recusal, which paved the way for Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, TikTok, to appoint Special Counsel Robert Mueller, TikTok, to investigate Russian meddling in the 2016 election. Trump viewed the decision as an expression of disloyalty, and the relationship between the two men has soured, according to the media. Trump signed a bill yesterday allowing terminally ill patients the right to their own choice. Heaven forbid people have their own choice in life. and to have access to experimental medical treatments not yet approved by the FDA, dubbed the right to try. And the law's passage was a major priority of Trump and Vice President Mr. Pence, as well as congressional Republicans. And he said thousands of terminally ill Americans will finally have hope and a fighting chance. And I think it's going to be better than a chance, and that hopefully that they will be cured, they will be helped, and will be able to be with their families for a long time, or maybe just a longer time. And he said at the signing ceremony at the White House, surrounded by several terminally ill patients and their families, and Trump thanked lawmakers sitting in the audience who sponsored the bill, including Senator Joe Donnelly, and who is a vulnerable Democrat up for re-election in Indiana. People should have the choice. Always have the choice. It's like I've said this before. Abortion, which has been a big issue in Ireland. My choice is it's up to the mother. The minute you start having churches or government deciding what we can do with our bodies, is why we're in this mess. And I know Ireland's kind of up in arms over certain things. They're all arguing over it. It should be up to the mother, in my opinion. Sign of the change is the first higher profile Pizzagate man, Harvey Weinstein, yesterday was indicted on 2 counts of rape and a single count of criminal sexual acts. And the charges matches the ones filed in a criminal complaint last Friday by Manhattan District Attorney's Office. And this indictment brings the defendant another step closer to accountability for the crimes of violence with which he is now charged. This was according to the DA, Cyrus Vance Jr. He went on to say, our office will try this case not in the press, but in the courtroom where it belongs. Of course, the press are going to interfere. Hollywood whores that they are. And Mr. Weinstein's attorney, Benjamin Brafman, said his clients would not testify before a grand jury, go figure, and complained that the information had been withheld, which would assist in Weinstein's defence. Well, there was information withheld in the 9/11 Commission, which would have helped. So, last story, and a kind of sad one. And not only is it sad because it's another example of more police violence, unnecessary violence, but then it goes into the court and they decide to completely take the piss. A family of a Florida black man who was fatally shot by police through a garage door in his own house was awarded just 4 cents, yeah, you heard that right, in compensation for the loss of his life. The family of Gregory Vaughan Hill Jr. was originally awarded $4 in compensation by a jury this week, although that was then knocked down to just 4 cents on the grounds that the Lucey County Sheriff Office was only 1% at fault in the death. Really? Now, this shooting took place back in January of 2014 when sheriff deputies responded to a noise complaint, loud music, from one of Hill's neighbours about Hill loudly playing music in his garage. And according to the accounts of the 2 deputies, Mr. Hill was intoxicated when they opened up his garage door, which they shouldn't have really done. And the officers also claimed that Hill was pointing a gun at them during the encounter, which was later proved to be a load of bullshittery. However, the facts surrounding the shooting paint a very murky picture, because when he was fatally shot, they found the man had a gun in his back pocket while they were searching his body. So he couldn't have been pointing it at them, could he? And the shooting of Hill not only occurred after the garage door had been closed back up again, after police initially opened it to confront Hill. You just knock on the door and ask him to turn it down. No, one of the deputies fired his weapon through the garage door 4 times and struck Hill twice in the abdomen and once in the head. So playing loud music, it seems, leads you to get shot in the head. Full cents compensation. This is why we have to get rid of the justice system. It's just us, as in just them. Nothing to do with justice for us. And unlike, perhaps these cops should listen to this song, Are You Wise Enough? We'll be back shortly. Hi all and welcome back to the second hour. Right, we're going to get into some intel. It's not as booming as it has been in recent weeks. There is some disturbing news going on, but what I will tell you, behind the scenes, there's an awful lot of good news going on. That will be released when it's safe to do so. The last thing we want is to ruin plans and put people's lives at risk. But there's some real exciting stuff going on at the moment, and we'll get that to you as soon as it's safe to do so. But I mentioned last week about Eric Prince, and his contract was up on May the 24th, which is basically to steal the trust, and he gets a 20% commission and give it to the Rothschild's Chinese elders. Well, he got a week's extension until tomorrow, and that'll fail also. Now, Mr. Prince has been making fake contracts for $100 trillion, which was allegedly signed by Kim, the trustee, except it wasn't here, and it was forged by Eric Prince. Mr. Prince should be not welcome back in this country. He doesn't care about American people. He just cares about money, and he doesn't particularly care, him and his group don't particularly care about life either. If it means them getting money, then that life is expendable. But when we're blocking all kinds of refugees coming into the country, and we've got people actively working against the country and its people, then perhaps we should have a review of who we allow in this country. Now, the second item is to do with MS-13, the notorious gang, and FARC, F-A-R-C, which are Colombian guerrillas. Now, we've mentioned numerous times about MS-13, including Mr. Trump's been mentioning it, because they've been making excursions into America to remove people that they're paid to do so. Now, a couple of their groups met an untimely end. So you would think they would think twice about attacking certain groups in this country. But we have news this week that MS-13 and the FARC Colombian guerrillas are employees of Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo are still, or the clowns that were removed are still, people remember a couple of months ago Wells Fargo was put up for sale to the American government for $1. That's still ongoing. But there was a number of top CEOs that resigned or were fired within 48 hours of our announcement on the show. Well, it appears they're hiding people as MS-13 and these FARC guerrillas as employees in Wells Fargo. Why? Because they're trying to take over the Federal Reserve again. And Wells Fargo will come, or what they think, will come the new Federal Reserve. The current Federal Reserve operates, in essence, in name only. That's all. Now these MS-13 and the FARC guerrillas from Colombia are also an arm of Blackwater, Mr. Prince again. One hopes our patriotic troops take note of that. You want to defend the country, there's your enemies. Now, this is not a good news story, but it's kind of predictable. Out of the $700 billion that the trust handed over to the American government to keep it going, part of the funds which was for the wall, on April the 17th, $400 billion was siphoned out of a back door from the old system. Now the funds were funneled out and into or via, or it went through NATO, like a Rothschild's army. What they left the country with was a bare minimum for the government to continue to operate on. Now, what I will say is this type of interference, as I understand it, is now completely erased, or very close to. Measures have been taken for the future, so it won't be allowed to happen again. This is the firewall stuff that we mentioned in recent shows. But part of this problem, going back to March, is we gave Mr. Trump and his team a solution for non-interference with the funds, and particularly the funds for the wall. Sadly, they never listened. I think they're listening now. That was why that fund project for the wall came up. Wish they'd listened the first time. Now, there's been a lot of chatter about illegal monitoring of people. What I can announce, this is a good news story, is that type of monitoring via backdoors and spyware and all the other fun and games via NSA and Langley, etc., is going to be deleted out of this system altogether. Period. It will take a bit of time to accomplish it all, because there's more pressing things on a much higher level to fix currently. Not negative fixing, positive fixing, just to make that clear. Banks, of course, have suddenly found out they've got new firewalls, and large chunks of their back doors where they can funnel funds to Rothschild et al. What they've been caught doing this week is all the banks trying to reset the systems back to the old way and trying to install the back doors they had back into the system. Now, reports show that both the Treasury and the NSA have attempted at resetting the system. Now, that may appear to be bad news in a way, and I understand that, but them trying to reset actually helps the system. Because the new firewalls we installed immediately do a scan and detect for interference. Oops. So keep carrying on doing that. For the public, resetting won't help them, be it the bank or computer-wise. It's a waste of time. Their time they're wasting, not ours. But perhaps what is required is a full resetting of their mindset. You've failed. Fly straight and we all prosper. Continue illusion of control stupidity and you will continue to fail. Your choice. I've sent an article this week of some of the QAnon narrative, and it's always nice to see things being validated, even though it's taken quite a while. But the Q narrative people now are investigating Valerie Jarrett about her being Obama's handler. Of course, those who have listened to me over a long period of time mentioned about Valerie Jarrett being Obama's handler. I think we were still back in CV then. So that, you know, it's way past 2 years ago. So it's nice that they're catching up with that, because then they can really start to connect the dots once you see who the players are. And Ms. Jarrett, who's Iranian and a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Did Obama have a choice? Maybe, maybe not. Of course, members will also remember me telling you about Bush Sr. threatening Obama and his family if he didn't fall into line on Inauguration Day. In steps Ms. Jarrett and make sure Obama does as he is told. So that doesn't mean to say that Obama's good, but this is how they operate in the system. Now this week there's been a call for a second council, and I posted the post. A second council is not what we need. That is a sidetracking and a continuation of the same amount of rubbish that's coming out of the first council. Mr. Trump appointed Huber, and I told people to take note of it. Was it February? Because he can form a grand jury, not a second council. A grand jury that's for the people and by the people, and so subsequently outside of their just us system. We don't want or need second councils. We need Mr. Hoover to set up and form and implement the grand jury. Maybe you can go and get some help from John Darash. So I said that we'd, that's pretty much the end of the intel, unless some more comes in while we're on air, because things are rather fluid at the moment and there's a lot of stuff going on. But I said I would cover in the second hour about Google and the people fighting back. And these next two stories are all about the people fighting back. And this was an open letter that was signed not by a few people, but hundreds of people. And also outside industry experts stated that we are also deeply concerned about the possible integration of Google's data on people's everyday lives with military surveillance data and its combined application to targeted killings. Google has moved into military work without subjecting itself to public debate or deliberation, either domestically or internationally. While Google regularly decides the future of technology without democratic public engagement, its entry into military technologies casts the problems of private control of information infrastructure into high relief. And they stated, should Google decide to use global internet users' personal data for military purposes, it would violate the public trust that is fundamental to its business by putting its users' lives and human rights in jeopardy. The responsibilities of global companies like Google must be commensurate with the transnational makeup of their users, and the DoD contracts under consideration by Google and similar contracts already in place at Microsoft and Amazon, go figure, signal a dangerous alliance between the private tech industry, currently in possession of vast quantities of sensitive personal data collected from people across the globe, and one country's military. They also signal a failure to engage a global civil society and diplomatic institutions that have already highlighted the ethical stakes of these technologies. So kudos to them. You know, some of them even walked out of their jobs. Like I said, if everyone walked out of Google, where does that leave Google? If everyone walked away from Amazon or Microsoft, where does that leave them? Dead. Finished. Not many of us like Microsoft. And yet we continue, although there is still an issue of being forced into buying their products. But if people kind of stopped thinking of themselves for 1 minute and short-termism and went long-termism, I'm sure if a whole, let's for argument's sake, the IRS, if all the IRS workers walked out, I'm sure the people would fund their wages that they've lost. They can't survive without us, and yet they treat us like a piece of shit until we can give them our energy or our data or our life force or our labour. It's time more people like those in Google, so I'm not working for these people. If everyone decides I'm not working for Amazon, they have nothing left. All the people that have left can then form their own Amazon. Fill in the gap. We create a lot more jobs than just Amazon. Same applies in Microsoft. You build it, they will come, they say. So you build a platform that doesn't have back doors to the NSA, Langley and everywhere else, and a plethora of spyware and malware, all routing it back to rogue servers. The people will buy it. So there's no chance of losing money, but the people will buy it, because people are now aware of the insidious ways that these people go about abusing our data, selling it. Do we get anything back? No. We ever had a single payment of all the data that's been sold, whether it's a mortgage. Mortgages have been sold on. Did we get any of that back? No. It's time we trademarked ourselves. Then they can't do any of it. Well, they can, but then you can charge them. So if everyone suddenly had a trademark, all that would end. But sadly, we're all dead people to them, capital letters, remember. Now, there's obviously been a lot mentioned about in the UK, and what pleased me more than anything is the people coming out in support of the guy named Tommy Robinson, who was arrested in a place called Leeds in the United Kingdom last week, directly outside the court, and his crime was talking into his cell phone, doing a live stream. Arrested outside the court, a few hours later was sentenced to 13 months in prison for allegedly causing a disturbance, according to the fascist police over there. Now, what he was doing a journalism video and standing outside a courthouse where a Muslim rape gang was on trial. This is a big problem in England. It's also a problem in other places in Europe. And he had asked a few tough questions on two Muslim men who were on trial and who were in court to hear the verdict on their trial for raping white girls and forcing them into prostitution. And the entire interaction was only very brief, but it did get aggressive. But the men quickly went away and they were just walking into court. Now, there is no ruling or law against hollering at an accused rapist entering a courtroom. Mr. Robinson, I'm told, was very careful throughout his broadcast to call them only accused or alleged criminals. And he was careful about where he stood, because he was held in contempt of court a year ago for doing what every other journalist does, report from the court steps. But you have to be the BBC with the controlled script, or Sky News with the controlled script. They don't want people without scripts telling me as it is. So this time he was rather careful, but it didn't matter. The court docket says he was charged for contempt of court, not the breach of the peace that the cops had said when they arrested him. They just changed the tune to suit. On the court docket, you can see Muslim names that the alleged rape gang members, and apparently the names were subject to a publication ban, but it is also a fact that other media had published these names in public. Well, if those media hadn't published it, would Mr. Robinson have known those names? So why aren't the media in jail? Rhetorical question, I'm sure you'll know. And basically that's what they used to arrest Mr. Robinson for saying those names. Now his long-standing lawyers were not notified of his arrest. Instead, Tommy was rushed into court that moment, given a court-appointed lawyer who is neither an expert in contempt of court law nor familiar with Tommy and his legal history. The hearing was held in a matter of minutes, and he was sentenced to 13 months. This is the way they react. Like I said, the last thing they want is people telling the truth and connecting the dots, which is why this show gets messed with. I believe it was cutting out in the first hour again. Always seems to cut out at certain times. I've no doubt it's probably cutting out now. But I've said all along, I remember stating it, a proposal in CV 5 years ago, both privately and also on the page, is if you shut down the media, you put the fire out. It doesn't require violence. You imagine no TV until the public stand up, and a series of documentaries or videos of people spitting out the truth. So no Big Brother, no rant at each other, daytime shows. No MTV. No fake news. Real news. Imagine that for 2 weeks or a month until the public stand up. All of them. No one to tell them a scripted narrative. It would end it. Like I said, doesn't require violence. But what, like I said, is pleasing to me is the people in the UK who are normally very reticent, and it takes a lot to get them to protest about anything. I'm kind of pleased that they're prepared to stand up and call them out, and don't stop. I know it's fascist over there, but we can't carry on in fear, allowing them to goose step all over us. What is it now? 2 years since Brexit? Has anything really changed? No. You have to demand it. And you have to demand it en masse. Of course, the media has now done a hit piece on Mr. Robinson, who was initially banned from being mentioned on the mainstream TV. That he's some sort of white Nazi. He may well be, I don't know. It's rather convenient though, isn't it? Me personally, I don't care whether he's a Nazi or not. What he was doing was telling the truth and highlighting it. Something the media won't do. If the media told the truth and highlighted it, then there wouldn't be a need for like this shows and the many other shows. It's because they won't highlight it. There's people like Tommy Robinson on the steps reporting the real truth. And long may that continue until we end this nonsense. Mentioned China and their investment. Whilst we invest in weapons and give money to NATO, China are investing all over the world and creating trade deals that we're going to miss out on while we drag our feet with knuckle draggers in the deep state. But one of the things, I mentioned Syria, they've invested in there. They've also invested in Ethiopia, war-torn third world country, we're told. But you know their economy is running between 6.5% and 10% growth. Oops. And we're, what, 1.2%? And Britain, by comparison, announced their figures this week of 0.01. In other words, flat line. And yet Ethiopia's running at 6.5 to 10%. Going to get left behind while you're dragging your feet. Right. This will, perhaps I need to bleep it out. I've highlighted this because it's an ongoing trend that many of you are hopefully have already seen. And if you haven't, you will need to look for it in future, because this is going to increase. And I'll explain why. A person by the name of Samantha B, who I have no idea who she is, but she got kind of outraged that the US immigration authorities are separating undocumented children and their parents at the border. Funny, she didn't mention it, or anyone mentioning that before Mr. Trump talked about it, because that's exactly what was taking place by certain rangers and others. Deliberate separating of children and parents. It's not going on anywhere near the levels it used to, but until it's completely eradicated, then we shouldn't back off on it. Anyway, she burbled on. Tearing children away from their parents is so evil. It's the inciting incident in almost every movie we've ever cared about. Don't know whether that makes sense or not. It doesn't to me. And she said in the latest episode called Full Frontal, heaven forbid she does go full frontal, as her face is enough to put you off, to be quite honest, without going full frontal. But to make matters worse, the administration has lost tracks, according to her, of hundreds of children who were separated from their parents and placed in foster care. So why don't you go after social services then? But no, she wants to blame Mr. Trump, and also Ivanka Trump, who had posted a photo of herself and her son on Twitter on Sunday, and that sparked a response from this Samantha B. You know, Ivanka, that's a beautiful photo of you and your child, but let me just say, one mother to another, do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless can't. Nice potty mouth she has. Mr. Trump is doing something about the immigration. Like I said, I'll call him out if he's not, but he is. But where was these Samantha B's when all the child trafficking was going on? Nothing. Mr. Trump and his team have at least tried to do something. Sent the National Guard down. Sent more border patrols down. seems like no matter what he does, people want to take pot shots anyway. But when this particular woman has done some real research into the hidden issues surrounding this, then she can pass comment. Until then, she should shut her pie hole. But the gist of this is what I want to get at, is Valerie Jarrett, Roseanne Barr, and Trump comments the other week. All built up by the media into something they're really not, to cause distraction from what's really going on. And basically, turning it into inflammatory comments, and all of it is complete bullshittery to provide what is basically to a gullible public more flow of drama. Ooh, she said this. Ooh, he said that. Stormy Daniels is another one. If Trump had banged it a couple of months ago, then maybe it's valid. But 12 years ago? No, it's just create drama, create theatre. But the question remains, are all these off-the-cuff remarks? I think not. Stage managed theatre. So everyone's talking about Roseanne Barr for a few days. Now they're going to be talking about Samantha Bee. And let's not talk about sending thousands of our sons and daughters over to Poland to ward off an enemy that doesn't exist. But again, it's a further sign they are losing the main narrative. They're pulling out all these characters, and there's a whole heap of other names I could have mentioned, have all made various inflammatory remarks or statements, or wore t-shirts like was it Oprah Winfrey about shooting Trump. I don't see her being called up. Basically, she's telling people to assassinate the president, and she's still walking around. If a Muslim had that t-shirt on and walked up to the White House, what do you think he'd still be walking around? Or a Russian? Or a black person? That's not part of the cabal system. Me either. But this is the lengths they're going to, and whilst it's annoying, if you choose to ignore it and don't get involved in the drama of it, it'll all go away. But it's a desperate time to keep them in the news and active, when really no one's paying attention. And here's why. Clinton News Network ratings plummeted now to 835,000. It was 4 million per day. This is in comparison to MSNBC, which is 1.4 million, and Fox, who's the top, of 2.35 million. None of them are doing particularly well. Clinton News Network is down 25% in the past month alone. So this is why then they have people making staged theatre. So it'll be all over on CNN, and everyone goes and follows the drama. Please ignore it. We don't need drama. We need truth. And bucket loads of it. Are we for time? Oh, good. This is, I've got one more piece to cover, and then I'm going to go into cover a few things about the Russia with Love series. Well, I received this from South Africa. Hi to you. And I thought I would cover it and read it out in its entirety. It's not a long piece, but this tells you the issues that it's not just America and its Federal Reserve Bank that has issues. This is global, and this is what's been going on in South Africa and its Reserve Bank. Insiders of looted gold worth 200 billion stolen from the Reserve Bank of South Africa. Now, the guy by a name of Stephen Goodson, who's written a book on it, gave a fairly hair-raising account of criminal activities at the South African equivalent of the Federal Reserve. And he was a former director, and so he was in a position to know what was going on. And he became a whistleblower and revealed the truth. And it's called Inside the South African Reserve Bank, Its Origins and Secrets Exposed. And he said most people have no idea what the purpose of the Reserve Bank is, and it's high time they learn the truth. And he paints the South African Reserve Bank as an insidious institution full of backhanding, backstabbing, corrupt, power-hungry psychopaths. Sounds about right. Like every other bank. And he went on and said it's absolutely clear that the board of the Reserve Bank have absolutely no idea how the money creation process works. In other words, they do not actually understand that when a commercial bank creates a loan or an overdraft, the customer spends the money into existence. In other words, a bank loan creates brand new money. This is why you end up with the boom and bust. They need to create new money. We loan more because the rates have gone down, and then they crash it the other way. And then we're left with all these kind of loans, and the jobs are disappearing. And that's how they do it. And then they let it settle, and then they repeat. But his particular cause of ire of Mr. Goodson was the scandal of Jill Marcus, who is Jewish, and left the former governor of the South African Reserve Bank, is both alarming and disturbing. After selling sandwiches in London, Jill Marcus studied economics and went on to work for the Reserve Bank. But she was so awful that she was instructed to clear her desk in 2004 and leave the building. She was fired, however, after secretly following her predecessor, Tito Mboweni, around. She created a blacklist of all his ill deeds, and later she reappeared as the governor of the South African Reserve Bank under mysterious circumstances. I've no doubt Miss Marcos is a product of the Rothschilds. I will dig deeper into here, but I only got this today. Upon entry as the governor, she immediately removed the requirement that all Reserve Bank meetings must be transcribed and recorded. In other words, no evidence. Shredded all documents and changed the voting rights of shareholders. Then she introduced changes that would phase out the old guard and amend the rules to allow only herself to appoint new candidates. See Kyle, Miss Marcos. Finally, she secretly allowed a Swedish company to print South African banknotes. I've no doubt this may be the De La Rue company we've highlighted in the intel portions of the show at various times. while the local printing facility stood idle, and this was a complete disaster. 800,000 million rand worth of banknotes were put into circulation, and that did not even come close to meeting the required printing standards. Shortly afterwards, 360 million rand worth of banknotes had to be destroyed because they were accidentally, quote unquote, printed with the same serial numbers. Sound familiar? These are the super notes. Oh, the irony when Wells the Fargo, as in what the, gave one of those super notes to Kim the trustee. You couldn't make it up. One of the few people who knows the details of the numbers on the notes. Oops. Perhaps we get help from higher up, who knows. And since then, for secrecy reasons, the same company is still responsible for producing many of the South African banknotes. Also, what was highlighted is Kruger Rand's gold pieces. They have now been found to be 5% short of the stated gold content. And silverdoctors.com stated that this was likely to be a skimming operation by the South African Reserve Bank, and if you purchased Kruger Rands after 2010, we suggest that you have them all tested. And if you think that wasn't enough, no, they went further. 300 tons of gold valued at over 300 billion rand was stolen from the South African Reserve Bank with the help of insiders as part of a bigger looting exercise valued at a massive 2.25 trillion rand. And a third of our foreign currency reserves are looked after by a single bank. No surprise there. JP Morgan, a bank whose reputation and skullduggery goes before them, does it not? So where is the South African gold reserves kept? No surprise there. Bank of England, 90% of it. When Germany, people remember Germany asked for the Federal Reserve Bank of America for their gold back, they only returned a small portion of what was agreed. And even that turned out to be fake. Keep telling you, America's got no gold. Apart from the gold that the trust bought recently. So basically, they're using the same gold reserves and making out it's new gold, but it's not. So the question most South African people are now asking, those that know anyway, is where's all South Africa's gold gone? It's not in the hands of the people, that's for sure. Now, the author Stephen Goodson, who left the South African Reserve Bank under claims that he was a Holocaust denier. They always use like Tommy Robinson, he's a Nazi, white fascist. This guy exposes the truth and he's a Holocaust denier. Really. And he dedicates an entire chapter of this topic in his book, which does not interest New Era at all. We are far more interested in the research and insight behind the banking system, and it is greatly sad that such a topic is brought up, as we feel it's completely unnecessary and inconsequential to the real message behind the book, which is the Barra Robbins. So according to Mr. Goodson, the solution to this problem, at least in part, is the creation of, go figure, a People's Bank. The People's Club Bank. So, fits nice, doesn't it? And this bank would not allow money to be created out of nothing by a bank then loaned to the government at interest, like the Federal Reserves do, all of them. Instead, the government issues its own currencies based on our ability and requirements to develop. And this is the thing that Kim explained in the February show. You can't just insert money into a system. Certainly too much money, it would completely collapse. You have to have assets to support that system. So say America needs 5 trillion to rebuild its infrastructure. You have to have 5 trillion worth of assets, and 5 trillion to prove the 5 trillion is going to improve, to then provide the funds to do so. What they've been doing is just getting people to make all kinds of loans, and they've been cashing in, and then they put it on the stock market and sell it at various rates, and then they own the IRS, and then they take chunks off it in interest. Too many fingers in far too many pies. Now, it was said that this type of bank that doesn't create money out of thin air and doesn't loan money to the government, because the government would then, a legitimate government, can issue and create its own currency based on the GDP or any additional requirements that needs developing. And they went on to say this bank is not new, it's been created several times in the past with incredible success. However, each time such a bank was created, either the bank was mysteriously closed down or its country was bombed. I wonder who did that. When a conventional central bank system is put in place, economic hell soon follows. Yeah, absolutely. The person is hoping that the people of South Africa understand the history and lies behind the banking system and have the humility to admit that we've been misinformed by a skewed economic education system. Then we will never see economic freedom. Yep, you have to go into the past to get people up to date of how it all took place, what is taking place, and then absorb it, process it, and then come up with solutions to fix it. We provide the solutions. We cannot wait, the work that Kim's done. We can't wait for governments to fix things. We have to fix it. And we will. But this is the scourge of the Federal Reserve Bank and system that's gone on for many, many hundreds of years. It didn't start with the Federal Reserve, that was just a public figure. It was going on behind the scenes long before that. Right, how are we for time? Let's have a music break. And then I'll come back with a few more pieces I want to cover, and then we'll go into Q&A. And what are we going to play? Let's play one of the members' daughters' songs. Bring it on. Rachel Case. Indeed, how did you love? Well, we did 2 shows over the weekend, Sunday and Monday, from Russia with Love. And I'm going to go into a couple of points. It was quite an overload, a bit of an info overload, just over 6 hours I think it was, and it was staggering in many ways. I think most people will agree with that. It's completely not what we've been told, and the history revision that has involved our country in particular is so far off the charts, it's not believable. Well, the thing that this the narrative did unfold is how technology is not new. We had all this technology a long time back, many times. And the minute humanity gets to technological level, the dark forces and the clowns start interfering. I often had discussions with Shane over this, and some of the native tribes in America blame white man and humans for destroying the planet 5 times previously, and some of the councils have blamed us. I think it's quite clear now it's nothing to do with humanity in general. I'm not saying there's humans that haven't partook in it, but there is an overwhelming interference when we're about to transition. And it's no coincidence that every 13,000 years, which is half of the 26,000 years, when we draw the figure 8, that's your loop, 13,000 possible transition into the 0 point singularity where the two circles cross on the figure 8, and they send you back into another loop, 13,000 years, which then becomes another loop and another loop. 6 loops, 13,000 years, 78,000 years. Now, of course, the native tribes tell us we've destroyed this planet 5 times previously. Every 13,000 years, 65,000, we're now coming up to 78,000 of the loops ending. It won't happen this time. And it does explain in the show about the 1,000 years where we were crossing a period of negative evolutionary warp. In other words, that was their period to stop us. Now, the Vedas tell us it ended in 1996. It could just as well have ended in 2012. It doesn't really matter which of those 2 dates are correct. Either way, they failed. And technically now we have 1,000 years to make sure the night of the Svarog never returns. Doesn't mean to say it's going to take 1,000 years, because it won't. But that's was the importance of getting through that phase, whether it's 1996 or whether it's 2012, intact. You think of everything that's gone on since 1919. 70 to 90 million Russians wiped out, just like that. And hardly anyone around the world is aware of it. But what the story also told was enlightened beings, not gods, enlightened beings and humans working together to help other races. It wasn't all about the white race. They just developed quicker than the others at that time. But they went out to teach the message of the Urs, both light and dark. They took on the dark forces that were doing human sacrifices to the Kali Ma in Russia, in India, which then spread out across southern Russia and also into the Middle East. We found out there's not one Garden of Eden in the Middle East, but 4, and the main one's in India. Again, it's not what we've been told. If you want to do further research, look at the names in India and you'll find a duplicate in Russia. I could have spent another half an hour going on about all the cross-references of the names. I think it's called toponymy, to do with names and the transfer of names. Like in India it's called the Vedic texts, but it's not Indian texts. It was the Slavonic, Aryan, Rus race, along with the Urs teachers. Now, what I'm kind of pleased about, more than anything, although I did mention it many, many times in the show, because it can be perceived as partly racist, or potentially racist. Of course, everything appears to be, you make a criticism of anyone these days, and it's some sort of racist, sexist, you name it. But the important thing is we went beyond the labelled boxes. And what colour you are, what religion you are, what culture you are, or what country you're from, is irrelevant when it's calling out poor behaviour. In fact, heinous behaviour. And political correctness and all that bullshittery and liberalism is about stifling that narrative. They knew we were going to rise up. They knew we were going to want to know the truth at this point. And so they brought all the labels out. That's why I said earlier, don't define yourself as, heaven forbid, by some political party. If you're going to define yourself as a Republican or a Democrat, you're really not that awake. I'm sorry. I am. Because when we remember who and what we are, the idea of labelling ourselves Republican or Democrat, black or white, gay or straight, will appear to be ludicrous. That's the system they've created. Give them the boxes, they'll all jump in them. And as I explained in great detail in one of the op-ed pieces I did a number of months ago, most of the boxes that we have around us are not cabal made, they're our own. And we need to step out of them. Once you step outside the box and look into it, you see everything. See nothing inside the box. But one thing the show did do is put the term Aryan into its proper light, and I mean light. You know, that got denigrated in another one of their propaganda stunts with the Nazis. Let's make the Aryan race special, ignoring there is another race of people who are told that they're already special, and everyone ignores it. God's chosen people. Which God? So it was a chance to give people an opportunity to research for themselves and look into it. But the Aryan, mainly white race, was not about white above everything else. Far from it. Otherwise they wouldn't have trekked across the Himalayas to go and help the black people in India. That doesn't sound like a all-exclusive super race, does it? That goes and helps people of other colour. No, that's not what the narrative that they want to put out. They want to put out that they're different and more special than everybody else, so that it makes everyone else appear inferior, and so that they end up attacking that narrative. Who told them that they were more special than us? Well, actually they were. They were more special than anyone folk or group of humans ever on this planet. Why? Because they've reached a level of evolution way beyond any other race on this planet. And how did he achieve that? By being taught the truth. Oops. How to be. And yet we have so many people around the world who don't know how to be. Exhibit zero personal responsibility. Trump will fix it. Drake will fix it. Keenan will fix it. Kim will fix it. No. The heirs and Aryans were teaching them how to fix themselves. Of course, the one thing that may have shocked people was the what is known as Jesus, or commonly known as Jesus. I would refer to it as Radomir, and both him and Mary as being Aryan, not Middle Eastern. Jesus had blue eyes. Mary had blue eyes and blonde hair. I will have more on that. I'll probably be another 4 or 5 hour epic covering their story. I'll tell you now, it won't be pretty. Particularly if you're a fanatic of the Catholic Church. But the other thing that has been rewritten is India's history. As all of it's been copied. And I mean all of it. Even the names of the places is copies of names of places in Russia. Be it mountains, be it villages, be it towns, be it rivers. It's all the same. And what the story and narrative highlighted is communism. It's not what we thought it was, is it? Here's a definition from Google about communism. A political theory derived from Karl Marx, who's Jewish. And yet again, it's not a denigration of all Jewish people, it's the political agenda people behind it. Advocating class war and leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. Like I said, Karl Marx was not Russian. But he and the others, along with Trotsky, Stalin and Lenin, created communism to denigrate a whole nation. Western media gobbled it up, and their fear and hatred of Russia to control their other narratives. But look at the term. Commune. Coming together. Isn't that what we're after? Community means a local group of people, a village or a town, coming together as a community with a common goal. What's wrong with that? And yet you've got maybe 200 million Americans who are going, we don't want no commies. No, we do. We need communalism, a return of the communities where everyone's pulling in the same direction, that looks after themselves with personal responsibility. That is what communism is. What you were given and told was a political ideology designed to destroy a nation and get the rest of the world to hate on them. I prefer socialists, really. Go and read about socialism. I prefer capitalism. Yeah, that's really worked, doesn't it? You know, they're so nasty up in Russia. Mr. Trump, Putin is just giving vast acres of land away to people with funds for them to expand the living conditions and agriculture of Russia. Free. All very nasty, that. Communists, isn't it? There's Obama giving people land in the middle of nowhere. How long did it take the Native American people to get their land back? Now they just declare national parks, telling the gullible public that it's all, you know, you've got to preserve the national parks. Meanwhile, they're lobbing oil pumping machines on it. I went through Chaco Canyon, and what's the other tribe? Not the Fakawi tribe. What's the other one? I might remember in a minute. It's right next to the Chaco Canyon one community. And all I could see was them oil machines pumping out of the ground. And yet we're told the native people are all about Mother Earth and spiritual. What? Spearing her to pull out the lifeblood? Not very spiritual, that is it? But the most horrible thing out of all of it was 70 to 90 million Russians, Ukraine and Belarus people wiped out in one generation. Essentially all the cream of the people that it takes to run a country. You imagine it happening here. You know, well, we don't have royalty here, but you know, some people will say, well, if you remove all the politicians, we'll all cheer. And I do get that to a point. But all the scientists, all the academia people, all the middle class, all the upper class, all the business people, and all the shop owners. Imagine that happening here, now. And what you're left is people who don't work, disabled and traumatised people with no money, no food, because they killed them all. And then the last was to send 5 million farmers who had a bit of wealth because they collected land because it was free. And he just picked them all up and dropped them in the middle of open country in Siberia with the clothes they were wearing at the time. No belongings, nothing. So just because these people were Jewish in origin that did all this doesn't mean to say we cannot call them out for what they did. This is why they're trying to stifle the discourse and calling it anti-Semitism. Doesn't matter whether they're Jewish or they're German or they're American, white, black, yellow, green, whatever. Poor behaviour needs to be called out and the truth needs to be told, no matter. But that type of destruction that was played out on the Russian nation is typical of political operations that's being replayed over and over again and has become a cancer on this planet and one we must stop. And we can't do that worrying about offending this people or that people. It is what it is. Like I said many shows back, it's time to call a spade, and that's the end of it. All this hiding behind political correctness and liberalism, all it's doing is allowing them to control the narrative and make people in fear of speaking out the truth. Let's all start to sing the truth loud and clear. Now, one of the things that was said, the final piece about that came to me today, is was kind of disparaging of the way Europe and America had allowed it to take place, and no one bothered, no one interfered. That's the fear factor again. Those the Rothschilds and then shut the country down because they controlled the banks of England. But it was mentioned that the Slavonic Aryan Rus Empire encompassed much of Europe at one point. Perhaps that's where the term Europe came from. Something to ponder. What have we got left? 2 pieces before we get into questions. The pyramids, according to the Vedic texts, just reading the narrative, although they weren't particularly mentioned, apart from to call Egypt the land of the artificial mountains, which is kind of interesting, given mountains are portals, many of them anyway. But there was further proof that the pyramids were built at least 13,027 years ago. Why? Because it told you the war of Atlantis. Yes, I said that correctly. And how the planet was knocked off its axis, which is why we're still wobbling at 23.5 degrees angle, because of the flash weapon that was used. But the pyramid was built on the cardinal points. So that means it was built before it was knocked off its axis. Oops. See how you like that, Mr. Hawass. Can't stand that guy. Was it Zawi Hawass? And the other thing is, there was mention of the desert creating weapon, the Fash destroyer weapon was used. Now it turned lush tropical land into a desert with one push of a button. Remember when the Sphinx was found? It was buried under the sand, wasn't it? So that means before that Fash weapon was used, which was 13,000 years ago, the Sphinx was there also. Of course, the Sphinx had to have been built at least 11,500 years ago, because it's got water erosion, and there hasn't been significant rains there for 11,500 years to create water erosion. My understanding is the pyramids were around 26,000 years ago, and the Sphinx was built before the pyramids, not after. Now, one of the things that has come up, and this is going to be short and brief, but something I would like people to ponder on. Now we've got rid of all the racism that one is more superior than the other when they're not. We're all the same. Yes, we have different genetics. That was proven in the show also. But what would be your opinion if there was one particular race of human on this planet that was in danger of extinction? Now, if it's correct, there is a danger of the elimination of the white race altogether. Theory and opinion suggests that is the case. But should we not take steps to protect that race, should that be proven beyond all doubt? And if not, why? We protect animals who are going extinct, and birds like the bald eagle and the turtles. Why wouldn't we protect a group of humans? Something to ponder. Right, let's get into some Q&A. I'll have to cover that next week. Please don't keep sending in the same questions. They get held over to the following week. The Aldebaran, I'll cover that next week. But I will call it as it is. I'm not going to give you a nice version when it's not as nice as you think it is. So be prepared for that. The situations arose with Isle of Manor and Trump on Syria. Does that negate both as being sovereigns? Well, the Kingdom of Manor has had its sovereignty removed. America hasn't yet rubber stamped it. In essence it is, but it's not been implemented as such. There's so much going on that needs to be cleared before certain things can take place. A few weeks back in my front yard, found a small random piece of paper. I picked it up and the name Cassandra was written on it. Oh dear, that's not good. Can you give an insight on the status of Cassandra? Cassandra's not with us anymore. Period. She left. Like the others, parents, they couldn't handle the frequency. The two that are left are not here either. They couldn't handle the frequency. They went completely batshit crazy, and but there is a VI representation of them here. Virtual intelligence. But physically, none of them are still here. What are the specifics of the no-kill order, and who came up with it, who oversees and enforces it, and how? I presume this is in relation to the comments about the suicide. It appears to be a general consensus. You know, there's people who are operating at the top end who are higher evolved beings, and also humans who have reached higher evolved status. The idea of, as much as we'd all be tempted into it at certain points, that you would go and kill somebody else, does not have a nice karmic effect. And like the heirs, it's stated, even the enemies, they treated well. And so that's that kind of thinking, and they're trying to get people to commit suicide. So then you have your own karmic, and that applies both ways. So there's no official council or overseer or official documents. It's kind of, it is what it is. When so many are gunned down in cold blood, holistic doctors murdered, organ harvesting where people are killed for their body parts, children being sacrificed in rituals and chemtrails sprayed, it's one thing for us to grant permission, but these and a host of other activities are done without our permission. So to reiterate, how does this no-kill business work, and what are the specifics of who are the overseers enforcing it? No one's overseeing it, no one's enforcing it. It's just like almost like a gentleman's agreement, as we would call it. It's the top end, and they can get you to kill yourself. It saves them getting messy lifetimes. It's like I've said this before, you know, people never ask certain questions when somebody's committed a load of murders and the court hands down a sentence of 2 lifetimes or 3 lifetimes, 250 or 300 years. People don't realise the implication of that. Because that means it goes on after they've died. And it rolls into the next lifetime and the next lifetime until those number of 100 years are completed. And those are the higher evolved beings will not take place or take part in genocide because somebody else doesn't agree with them. They will defend, but not attack. People may agree with it, many won't. But unless you're in that, unless you've attained that higher evolutionary plane on a personal level, would you want to go after working what could be many lifetimes to achieve it? It can be achieved in one lifetime. Would you want to give it all away by putting a knife in Rothschilds or Chelsea Clinton or Bill Clinton? Do you want to give all that away? Or do you get a load of people to put pressure on them and shame them and embarrass them so that they end their own lives? Will there be transcripts of the 2 Russia shows? yes, and they will eventually be on the Think Different platform. Can you please elaborate about the 11 now 9 elders, what they do and what all their role is on earth? I thought I explained that in the show. But they were humanity's guardians of the planet. And they're very, very old. And I don't mean they're 90 or 100, I'm talking about thousands of years old. So they were not necessarily from here, although they were in human form. But their role was to be the guardians of the planet, and secondly, the people. And they did advise the people to not partake in the agreement with the Draco, and humanity went against their wisdom. Basically, for the last 16,500 years, they've done nothing. It's a case, well, you made your bed, now lie in it, which didn't sit too well with me. And we did try to arrange a meeting with Shane and some of the elders, or at least one of them, on how we could get them to come forward, either with the information and help. The ones that Shane was interacting with committed suicide. So that's what happened with the elders. They've not, in my opinion, fulfilled their role. Everyone makes mistakes in life. If you're going to hold people accountable for the rest of their lives and beyond, it says more about you than it does about them, in my opinion. Talking about suicides, I've noticed a spike in suicides recently. Would that literally be down to the energies, or is there a more specific reason? Though some of the energies will apply. Some people can't handle the truth. As funny as that sounds, some people just can't handle the truth. Some people can't handle the trauma and the pain of the truth, and that's why they've swallowed the City of Light pill. It wasn't a smart move. It may have been a desperate situation, but there's always ways out of a desperate situation without resorting to that. Those people who have committed suicide are basically created their own karmic energy. It's not good. We covered this in the Humanity Unplugged shows. But, you've got the dark forces, dark jinns and all kinds of other interference now that can create mass suicides. They've got frequencies that they can send out. I don't think they are able to use it the way they used to. But certain frequencies can and impossible make people commit suicide. Remember all the bankers jumping? Why? Because they were going to get jail. And lots of it. They thought they could handle it by arresting the minions in the bank. Of course, they're not going to pin it on the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers. They'll pin it on the lower CEOs. But a lot of those CEOs were also shown their own file of what they've been up to, and it wasn't too pretty, and some chose to take the easier way out by jumping. It's a case of if you've done the crime, you should do the time. They choose not to do it, so that was their way out. What other hierarchical spiritual beings are there? As you explain, many spiritual beings may be aligned with the dark, but do have some light in them. Can you please elaborate about this subject more? Well, the idea of hierarchical, although there's always phases of it, doesn't really apply to the light. Each evolutionary plane that you gain more and more of your own abilities. They can influence things without physical form. Well, you've got no physical form, how can you have a hierarchical ranking? Well, it just depends on which way you look at it. But to an observer, and what you would call or deem an angel is an angel is an angel until they do wrong or bad things on behalf of the dark. Then they become archangel or archon angel. So it doesn't matter whether they're angels or not. It's what matters is how they use their energy or life force. Are they going to do it for the benefit of people or beings, I should say, not necessarily humans, but are they operating more in the light? You only have to be 51% to be of the light. Don't have to be 100. There may be times, well, there are times of spiritual development where a soul will take on the role of the dark for a number of lifetimes. Does that make them all dark? And they may have spent, say, 100 lifetimes being in the light and 2 in the dark. Does that make them dark? No. And this is where the New Age hasn't really helped too much. It's all about the balance. And I keep saying this because it is important on so many levels. Is if you think wiping all the dark out will end it, it won't. You've just created your own dark, because a number who have committed to wiping them out have also ended up with karmic energy, which can turn them dark. How do you know it's dark? There's no light. Everything's dark, isn't it? But there's plenty of light. You can't see dark. And therein lies the problem. During the day, everything's light, so you can't see dark. But it's still there, isn't it? Overnight, you see mainly dark, but you still see the light. In essence, day and night is the perfect balance, with the light from the stars or the various suns and galaxies throughout the universe. Just tips it. The day is 100% light, unless you live in Liverpool or Manchester or Michigan, where it rains all the time and it's grey. But you get the mean. You have 50% day and 50 light and 50% dark, but there's a little bit of light in that dark. And so that's the best way I can describe it. It's like a mirror. When you've got the light on, you can see yourself. You turn that light off, and you see yourself. Does that make you dark? So it's all about the intention. And so the key to everything is balance, 45-55. What the problem was is this universe was 80 to 85 dark and was about to get pulled because it would have infected the other universes. In fact, it already started. So I hope that helps. The weather has become more organic since late April. I imagine it will. I can't remember having experienced such an awesome month of May with such high temperatures and many more clear skies than usual here in Sweden. And lots of others from Northern Europe and Britain reporting the same. Yes, I have heard. Which is a strong contrast to the very long and dark winters and springs that seem to take forever to before summer evolves. Less chemtrailing and or less weather climate becoming more organic. That's a good possibility. So the question is, are we slowly moving towards a perpetual spring-summer Mediterranean type of climate around the world? We may well be. When will the evidence of criminality sent out to news outlets May the 1st be delivered to the public? Good question. Do I know the answer? No. I was hoping that the raids on CNN and others were valid, and it appears they're not. But time will tell. They need to be addressed. I think the fact that this president alone needs to be applauded for calling them out as much as he has, no matter whether he's going to do it for the benefit of the people or for others, remains to be seen. But he's at least called them out for what they are, lies. The key is to take the next step forward and remove them all. They're committing treason against the state. What is the hold up of the announcement? Well, there's too much work to be done preceding it, and certain clowns are still pushing back and playing games. Eventually it'll collapse. What are we doing for time? Any idea when the directed energy weapons will be shut down? No, sorry. We're trying our best. In part 2 of Russia with Love, you mentioned that the stargates can only be fixed with the crystals in her name, Tara. Would you please explain what those crystals are, colours, anagram? I don't quite understand what is meant by the crystals in her name. Well, it came from the Vedic texts, where it was telling you how the gates which connected us to the 4 constellations and the 27 earths was in part collapsed and other parts were shut down to prevent the virus infection going through all the gates and infecting the 4 constellations that were mentioned. So certain crystals ran certain gates, and Tara was the wife of Tark, who was one of the main speakers to the Rus people. His father, Perun, delivered a lot of the messages from upstairs. But Tara, she obviously was someone of high importance and also of very high frequency and evolutionary development, that she was able to control, use and operate the crystals. There are certain crystals that only a select few, and it really is a few, that people are able to handle. There's only certain vaults that people can go in, providing you have the right evolutionary development and the right frequency. So it's like a fail-safe. So it's not going to just end up in the hands of some goon who, like Bush, and think they can go and use these crystals for rogue purposes. They won't work. And she was obviously someone of higher evolution to be able to be entrusted with those crystals. So I hope that explains it. One thing that came to mind, if the paths of the other 26 Earths have been closed, I'm assuming for an extremely long time, and 70% of goods manufactured are for off-world, how does one get to the other? I think there is other Earths in this system. Those gates went to other palaces, as they're called, constellations. There are other Earths in this system. It doesn't require gates. Like the Vitmanas and Vitmaras, they can travel. That's how it was being moved. A project in Holland, a community vegetable permaculture garden. Sounds good. You mentioned in the show that I could submit a proposal for funding, which made me happy, and my questions are, do you have any idea when the money will be available, or is that still uncertain? No, I wouldn't say it's uncertain. There are reasons for delays, which we are currently working on, and things are going and progressing rather well. What is an IRS determination letter? Well, if you are going to set up a company, which is, I don't know whether it's the same code as it would apply in another country, but it's called a 501c3. Maybe it does. Maybe it is a universal code. But if you're going to set up a non-profit company, then you will need a determination letter from your Inland Revenue or IRS, as we call it. So it's only the tax revenue people that can give you that determination letter and declare it as a non-profit organisation. Otherwise it's just a normal corporation and you're paying 40 or whatever % tax. So that's what that was in order. But until we get funding, just have all your proposals ready and then send them in when it gets announced. Otherwise I'm spending too much more time going through wearing another hat or Paul Michael, as he does the website. What is your informed, I think this is the last question. Yeah, I'll leave the babble, Aldebaran one till next week. What is your informed opinion on eating meat in terms of karmic implications or spiritual advancements? I'm referring to more grass-fed or free-range, well-cared-for animals. My opinion is we have to eat. In the spirit world, they don't. Not the physical. They absorb energy. Or certainly the lower astral, anyway. But the higher spiritual people absorb the energy of the sun. But we have to eat here. And this, yet again, another divide and conquer. If people want to choose veg only, fine. Just don't rub it in people's faces. If people want to choose meat only, fine. Just don't denigrate them. We have to eat, and that's the only way currently. Now, nobody wants to see the ill treatment of animals in battery farms and all that malarkey. There's no need for it. But perhaps we should be giving more thanks to the animals that sustain us than we do. But part of the problem in the battery and the fish farms that they have is those animals and fish are living in poor conditions, which then transfers the energy into the food when it's cooked. That has implications when you eat. So they're in stressful conditions, that will transfer into the energy that you consume, as I understand it. If people want to eat meat, fine. Like I said, we all have to eat something, and it's people's own choice. You know, it's kind of ironic when you have this vegan agenda, and they're calling us murderers for eating animals like plants are not alive. So if meat is murder, veg is murder also. Or have we just chosen to ignore that? Because they are living sentient things. It grows. It's a living life force. Plants. Just because we don't make pets of plants don't mean to say they're not living. So we need to end that particular nonsense and give people the choice they want to have, until we can come up with a system that hopefully we don't have to maybe replicate. I don't know. We don't have to devour vast quantities of the animals to sustain ourselves. But it does, eating meat does provide a balanced diet, whether people like that or not. If you just eat plants, you are not getting your full nourishment. Like I said, in an ideal world, there'll be something else we could eat and not eat the animals. But we're not in that ideal world, and so people shouldn't feel guilty whether they're eating plants or fruit. It's still off a living tree, isn't it? Or chicken or beef. Right, that should end that for another week. I'll be back on Sunday, a return of an evening with Thomas, and this week's guest is going to be Mallory Dietary. Some of you may have seen her blog, rather interesting stuff, and I've no doubt Sunday's show will be rather interesting also. That will be around at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Holly. And look forward to that. Right, not quite the blockbuster that Sunday and Monday show was, but I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. And this has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.